Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Greg Cochran, and I'm the Executive Vice President for Pilco and Associates. Thank you for joining and watching our leadership video series. And today I am joined by Charlie Leroy and Jack Davis. Charlie and Jack have been in the energy industry for decades. They are captains of the industry. So we're thrilled to have them today. The subject that we're going to be covering is energy management. And before we get into that too deep, I'm going to ask Jack and Charlie to give us a couple minutes of introduction. Tell us about yourself. Jack, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks, Greg. So I'm Jack Davis. I've got 46 years of experience in the oil energy industry, primarily downstream. It seems like it hasn't been that long. I think Charlie would probably agree with that. My focus has been on control, operations, and consulting. And I started out with Conoco straight as a process engineer with them, and then went on into control and optimization when I went to the Champlin's Wilmington refinery. Now it's a Valero refinery. There in California. Spent some time there and moved on to consulting with Profimatics. I was actually the vice president of Profimatics. We were bought by Honeywell. I became part of the Honeywell team for a couple of years, director of operations and director of research for them. And then I moved on to join Aspen Tech and Larry Evans. And worked with Aspen for 10 years. And during all that time, Charlie and I actually got together early on. When I was at Champlin, Charlie was at the sister refinery in Corpus Christi. So we've known each other for a very long time. And we spent some significant time together working on an energy management program for Valero. And I'm sure we'll chat about that a little bit as we go through.
Excellent. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. Charlie, why don't you go next?
Yes, my name is Charlie Leroy. I'm a chemical engineer from Georgia Tech. If like Jack, I've been out in the industry for 40 plus years and pretty much all in refining operations. That's kind of where my love is to be actually at the plant trying to make gasoline for a living. My last job, I was VP of refining operations for Valero and retired from there in 2008. Prior to that, I've been plant manager at 3 different refineries. And prior to that, I've been operation manager at a couple locations and tech service manager. And I started my career at UOP in Chicago as a process engineer, kind of like Jack, and did that for 8 years. I got my MBA at University of Chicago while I was in Chicago. And then when I graduated from there, I went to work for Valero in San Antonio. So I've been around the industry a long time and mainly refining operations assignments, and that's what I really like.
So you guys have just validated the captains of the industry comment I made earlier. You guys have been through, as have I, many economic cycles, ups and downs throughout your careers. But I want to kind of turn the table a little bit. Today's business leaders in the energy industry, oh my gosh, it seems like they have more on their plate than I can even possibly imagine, ranging from, kind of responding and coming back from COVID, shutting the global, industry down, to renewable energy push, to stakeholders demanding changes and improvements in environmental, social, and governance, the whole ESG agenda and the scorecards required for that. And then, of course, climate change and demands. So that's a backdrop of a bunch of things that are going on in the industry today, but we're going to focus on energy management and the value that can bring to the industry. So Charlie, I thought probably the best way to do that is for you to start with, tell us why and why do energy management? What's the upside of doing something like that?
Well, it's funny, Greg, the last year or so at Pilco, we've been talking about all sorts of ways we can help the industry and things that are driving needs in the industry. And it took me back to the fact that there's really 4 pillars of things that go into making an operational excellence plant. Well, one of them is safety. which Pilco spends a lot of time on. One of them is environmental compliance. One of them is reliability. And the last one's profitability. And when I think about profitability, OpEx is an important element of gaining net cash margin. And the two biggest things that affect OpEx in the refinery is energy and maintenance. And so to try to affect OpEx, I think energy is an important element. It's 30 to 40% of the operating expenses to running a refinery. And then when you start thinking about the fact that environmental compliance is important, and energy conservation feeds into today's priorities around looking at how we can reduce the carbon footprint and how we can be better stewards of greenhouse gas production and things. And so in the last year, it's kind of struck me that plants have an incentive to do energy management to reduce OpEx, because that adds to profitability. But they also have an incentive to do energy management because it reduces CO2 production and affects the carbon footprint, which is a big priority for the world right now. So it kind of puts these two things together in a way that I think create an incentive for companies to maybe revisit how well they're doing energy management. And Jack and I have done a lot of work in this over the last 20 years, and there's just some basic things that can be done at the plant level to conserve energy on an ongoing basis, and we're going to talk about those as we go forward. So that's kind of why I do it. Profit, and it's good for the environment.
Thank you, Charlie. I love the way you combine those two things. I think that is critical. They're not, diametrically opposed. They're actually on the same page, pulling in the same direction. So Jack, help us understand. I know you can go into a lot of detail here, but what are we talking about in terms of energy management? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so we, and it's Charlie pointed out, we've been at it for 20, 30 years now, doing energy management. It is not easy to do. So as Charlie said, the refineries have a lot of priorities, and probably fifth on their list is energy. So it oftentimes doesn't make the cut, and so the programs need to be structured. And so we start out basically with an effort to find what we call no or no cap or low cap opportunities at a refinery. And so what that does is it helps us understand the refinery in entirety and all of it. So when we look at the refinery, we're not just looking at energy opportunities, we're looking at margin opportunities, safety, studies, optimization, all of those details. And so they really have a good understanding of the refinery and its objectives and its strengths and weaknesses at that point. The other thing it does is it creates a list of initial opportunities for the refineries to work. And one of the things about energy programs is you need some momentum. And so if there's not, something in return for the effort the refineries are putting in, because they have to pull people off of other stuff, to do this. And so they've got to have some payback. And so this program, and we're going to talk about it in more detail as we go through, helps produce some what I would call no-brainers or quick hits, and so we're talking about things that really can be done almost immediately. From there, once you have the list, you've got to screen it, decide which ones you're going to go after, build implementation plans, audit plans, so you can see what you really get out of them. And from that, you develop some KPIs. So one of the important parts of energy management is you have to have some way of tracking results. And so that ends up with KPIs and dashboards, as modern techniques nowadays. And those things need to be updated frequently. They need to be in front of operations primarily. And the way we work at it, we try to do everything in dollars. And so if you have a gap in your energy, we'd like to tell operations it's worth, $10 a year or $1 million a year. It makes a big difference for them, and they can prioritize their work. So that's part of it. And then if if needed, if practical, we can also deliver an optimization solution. So when you're talking about energy, there's always trade-offs between margin capture and energy conservation. And so that's an optimization problem in the process space. So many times there's some optimization issues that can be addressed. Many times companies have APCs in place. Those are constraint pushers, not really optimizers. And so something over the top of them to help them head in the right direction, depending on the current operating conditions, is important. And then finally, probably the most important and generally overlooked entirely, is the sustainment of these programs. And so we've developed some business processes and techniques for sustainment. Really, that comes down into three parts. One, it's the day-to-day operations, meeting the targets and trying to maintain the benefits captured. The second part is executing those opportunities, the projects that we've unturned, and turning those into dollars for the company. And the third part is maintaining the tools. And so you've got a dashboard, you've got some KPIs, you've got some calculations, and it's data driven. And as we all know, data is always suspect. That's basically the whole program in a box for you, Greg.
Hey, Jack, let me make a few comments as it relates to what you just said, because Jack did this program for Valero, and we did it at all 14 refineries that Valero had. And what's interesting about it is when you do the initial brainstorming sessions, trying to look at where the opportunities are, in every example, we always found 3 or 4 things that were not exactly things we expected to find, and they weren't in many cases actually energy conservation ideas. They were optimization ideas, and those things turned into being huge payback items. And in most cases, there were always 1 or 2 things that overwhelmingly paid for the whole program all by themselves. And so it was always interesting to me that you almost have to go into this with a leap of faith, saying that I'm doing this to do energy conservation and I'm going to try to save OPEX. But the minute you get the brain trust of the refinery involved in thinking about how it's being run and what opportunities there are, it's amazing some of the things that will come out when you do that. So that was one quick comment. Sustainability was another one I just wanted to emphasize. Jack got to be really good at figuring out how he could weave into the fabric of the organization the energy program so that it stayed alive after the consultants left, and it with the dashboards and embedding some of these dollar figures into some of the daily operating reports and things, kept it in front of management and drove a high level of performance that allowed these things to stay alive forever, really. And then the last thing I was going to say is something else we discovered is people have to put some people resource into this program. We found that if a refinery didn't have a process engineer that was kind of tagged as being the energy coordinator, it was hard to keep some of these programs alive. So there has to be a commitment in people resources on some of this stuff too. So anyway, those are just a couple quick
Yeah, it really comes down to a management issue, doesn't it?
Yep.
But you mentioned, Jack, several times the dashboard and metrics and things that you can see, they're visible. I mean, in my experience, if you can get those kind of things in front of the right people and they're actually watching those things, it's at least a better way of kind of keeping this sustainable, keep it going, and keep it part of the operating discipline. I'm a little surprised, just frankly, and it's my lack of understanding of how a refinery works or that whole business. Little surprised at your very first statement about this being like a number 5 on the list. Because I would think that, this energy management program and managing that would be somebody's core responsibility in the organization. So talk to me a little bit about why is this low on the totem pole, and what do you do to get it up, to raise it up and make it more core, if you will?
Well, I'll start on that, Charlie, and I'll let you chip in. But the way I look at it is that the refineries really have, 5 priorities. And Charlie alluded to this when we started the conversation. One is, you've got to be able to stay in business. So you have to meet the safety and environmental constraints. So that is paramount. And if you're going to run a refinery, the second thing is you need to meet your operating plan. So you've got to run the crude you said you're going to run. You got to keep the units up and maintained. There's a lot involved in making sure you can meet your operating plan. The third thing is that you need to produce the products at the qualities necessary for your market. And so there's a bunch of effort gone into, making sure that works out. And then the what I call the fourth thing is what Charlie called profit. So you've got to, try to optimize this whole refinery. And, most people think that this, these are monolithic and you just, put crude in the front end and get products out the back end and you sort of turn it on, tune it up and walk away. Unfortunately, refineries don't work that way. They are always moving. There's always things changing, just always issues coming up. These are very complicated machines, and they take a lot of effort and energy. And primarily, that's the engineers, the process engineers. As Charlie would say, they're worth their weight in gold in a refinery. If you have good ones, they really can do it. So, and part of that, of course, is the optimization. The profit part is the optimization, the APC, the planning department. There's a lot going on. And so in that profit lump, as Charlie was saying, there's, you're trying to control your OPEX. And so, and the big chunk of that OPEX is your energy, but it's probably fifth on your list. In other words, if you have a tank off spec, that's going to take precedence over anything you have to do with energy. Charlie, you want to add into those comments?
Well, I think you did it really well. I mean, the only thing I would say is using a little more energy in a lot of units makes them easier to run and less likely to go off spec and not achieve their production goals. So that the operator is always, he probably gets more feedback for not making his product on spec and not making the production goals than he does because he uses a little bit too much energy in the units. And so I think what Jack's been masterful at is when they go in and look at these units, he establishes targets that appear to be reasonable for energy, but still allow the operator to achieve the goals. And then by looking at those targets, it just provides a little bit of discipline in the system to maintain it. But to your question, Greg, it really is. It's easier to run them with a little more energy consumption.
I get that.
And so that making it visible is key. So you can track it. Like I say, it's not monolithic. So as soon as things change all the time, and so you need to manage it and watch it. And the rubber hits the road with operations. And so you've got to give this information to operations. It can't just be an engineering project.
Yeah, in my experience, if you make this, not just this, but if you make anything complex, hard, overly difficult to manage, the likelihood of that happening is going to go down, 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 right? So I would assume that you've got to really make this, like you said, part of the daily operating discipline, and it fits into all the objectives that they have. Hey, talk to me about, because I think we've just kind of gone through this cycle, when natural gas prices are low or energy prices are in the trough, why am I worried about saving energy? I mean, what am I missing?
Well, this kind of feeds into the low cap, no cap discussion, I think. And what you just said is exactly right, Greg. When natural gas prices are low, most places don't have any economic incentive to spend capital on improving energy performance. There's just not the return. So they don't. So, but the low cap, no cap concept is there's a lot that can be done on the day-to-day adjustments at the plant to save energy, and identifying those and establishing this dashboard and these programs like Jack's talked about is really what it means by no cap, low cap. It says, what do you have to do to save money when you aren't going to invest in equipment? I'll let Jack expand.
Yeah, so just to set expectations a little bit, when you do low cap, no cap programs, and say you're running a refinery with 120 Solomon Energy Index numbers, where 100 is supposed to be good, you will not be able to move 20 EII points with low cap, no cap. So 3, 4, yes, and that's possible, and that should be worth $3 to $5 million to the refinery to be able to do that. But so it's Charlie saying you've got to do it without spending capital or big complicated projects. Some of those do pay out, so examples would be heaters where you have say some environmental issues with NOx or otherwise. And so you're going to fix that thing anyway. So you might as well get it to do energy. But those projects are expensive. What would you say, Charlie? $10 million to do?
Yes.
Do something like that?
Yeah, and the incremental savings isn't enough to justify them with
Yeah,
$2
never,
gas prices,
but you do have an opportunity to depending on what the heater's up to increase throughput, and improve capacity. And so lots of times those things are justified on those bases, and then the energy is just part of it. But programs we're pushing are let's look at what you got and do the best you can with it, and make sure that those best practices and optimum targets are in front of operations, and that they know what it's costing them if they're not meeting them. That's what we're suggesting.
Jack, one thing that's kind of interesting when you look at some of the Solomon data is you'll see that you go to the Far East over into Japan and Korea and some of those places, you'll find their energy indexes are a lot lower, and they've made capital investments to get their energy costs lower. But the issue is that they're paying $13 a million for natural gas over there.
Yes.
So they have economic incentive to make capital investment. We've been so lucky in the United States where we've gone out and discovered so much natural gas. We have those gas prices are down $3 plus or minus 50 cents most of the time. And so at $3 gas, you can't justify some of the capital that other parts of the world do routinely. So but you still can be good operators and save that $2 to $3 million a year and just operating better.
Well, like you were saying earlier, Charlie, there are more advantages than just saving money. And obviously, money is, being more cost effective is huge, but you're also accomplishing other environmental objectives, lower greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, by doing this, right? So, Jack, I know you've done this, and I would suggest don't go too deep into the technical weeds, but give us some of the examples of where you've done this and what are some of the results.
So I've worked on over 28 refineries doing these projects, and one Charlie and I started with the Valero, and they actually published a paper at the NPRA Q&A in 2011, and they claimed $220 million a year of benefits from their program, and that was a large extent was energy cost reduction, but they also had margin improvements. So they were looking at their hydrogen balance, the fuel gas system, capture of LPG. So there was other margin type things in there that made up that money. But it was over 14 refineries, but still it was an extensive, an impressive win for them. Other refineries, another system I worked on with 9 refineries. We actually audited each one of their benefits and ended up with $147 million a year in benefits from those nine refineries. And similarly to Valero's experience, some of that is margin improvement. They had a significant issue with LPG. So just to get into the weeds a little bit, there was one refinery that had a cogen and a hydrogen plant and a hydrocracker and a cat. They had all the things where they should be doing pretty well, energy-wise. But the problem they had is that the fuel gas they were burning in the heaters had too big of molecules in it. And in fact, the cogen would cut them off and tell them, we can't accept this feed. And similarly, the hydrogen plant would. And so to compensate, because they can't flare, they had to run their heaters inefficiently to consume it. So one of our problems when we walked into this thing is one is they had too much hydrogen they were wasting, and we need to sort that out for them. And the other one is that the molecules that, the LPG that was going into the fuel gas needed to come out. So we still needed to balance the overall BTUs of the gas so the plant would work properly. So that was the challenge. And so it turned out that we were able to help them sort out their gas plant a little bit and produce an extra 3,000 barrels a day of LPG, which they had a market for. And it produced roughly, I think, $27 million a year just from that little bit. So like Charlie says, is that, energy management, unto itself will pay. However, when you get into these projects, you run into some operational issues and it create, significant margin improvement. And you don't know that ahead of time, of course. As Charlie said, you have to kind of take that with a leap of faith. But all of those refineries, everything I've ever done, we've always come across, 2, 3, 4, 5 ideas like that. It really drive the whole program.
You just talked about some really big numbers, Jack. I mean, those are astronomical numbers. Why wouldn't I want to do this? I mean, are there reasons why this would not make sense?
So I think it has more to do with the fact that it goes in waves. The refineries get very interested in energy, particularly back when Charlie and I were working with Valero. The natural gas price spiked to nearly $14 a million BTU rather than $3 we have right now. And so there was a big push on it, and the management focused on it, and they worked hard and gained these benefits. But like I say, once you get there, you just can't raise the flag and walk away and forget. You have to continuously do it. So the sustainment issues, I think, is what is really the challenge for most refineries. And,
well, a comment I would make, Greg, as to why people don't do this is I sometimes think it's management and leadership. I think sometimes you show up as a consultant. A lot of plants don't have the ability budgetarily to bring in consultants, and unfortunately, a lot of refineries, their internal technical staff is diminished, and the experience levels are diminished, and where they think they should be able to do this themselves, or that they are doing it at some level, they really don't have the abilities to do them now, and they don't have the managerial systems to be allowed to bring in people like Jack to help out. So it's kind of a, you just don't get it done because of some of these barriers and roadblocks.
Yeah, that is a very good point, Charlie. And I think that, one of the things we've seen, Greg, is that refineries always have some energy programs going on, but really having some outside expertise to come in and organize a program like this and really drive it through and execute it is really required to gain the numbers that I was talking about. And Valero was very impressive in their managerial focus on this whole effort.
I think it's like everything that we ever talk about in these leadership series videos. Leadership matters, and management of how we're going to achieve our objectives and our goals and all those kind of things matter. So doing this and then keeping it and not losing the progress you've made and making that sustainable is the key. And you guys have made that very clear. I think I started with this statement, but in today's environment or today's business culture, things like renewable energy push and climate change concerns and, greenhouse gas emissions and all those things, those are synonymous, I think, or they're in the same league as what you guys are talking about, meaning you can save a lot of money by doing this, but you can also meet a lot of other objectives. Charlie, talk to us just a little bit more about that. And you've been there in the leadership management position in large organizations like this. Isn't that on your agenda as well?
Well, exactly. And it's actually becoming even more economic than it used to be, because there's a lot of places in the world that are actually putting carbon taxes on this industry, and they're actually coming out and saying, you're going to pay a tax based on how much CO2 you produce. So these programs can actually turn into money-making programs from an environmental perspective as well. So there's just a common sense element to this that fits in my mind. I mean, we always have tried to control our OpEx, and we've tried to manage and be good stewards of that. But the environmental elements, I think throw another whole piece into this, and it actually may actually start supporting some capital investment in some of these areas as far as energy goes, depending on what the political environment goes to. It may push the industry into having to make investments strictly to reduce CO2 production. So it seemed like the time is right to push this button a little harder to me.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate it very much. To those listening, if you want to know more information about what Charlie and Jack have been talking about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are more than willing to come and talk and to help you see things that they're talking about more clearly. You can reach us at www.pilco.com or at the email that you're going to see on the screen here. We would love to get together with you and work through this with you. In addition to that, we hope that you and your families are safe. COVID is still with us, so be careful out there and be safe. Thanks. Have a great day.
Yep.
Thanks.